Hello and welcome to episode 45 of Pushing Cardboard, recorded in May 2025. I'm Grant Lindenberg, and this episode will feature a live interview with designer David Thompson, recorded at a recent live cardboard live stream, as well as a dive into Supply Lines of the American Revolution Northern Theater by Amabel, Holland, and Holland. Not to mention a good dollop of news, what's been new to me, and all the other sorts of history and wargaming chatter you're used to. I'm recording this just before heading out on a family holiday to Iceland, so in a month I'll report back with everything you need to know about the wargaming scene on that little island. That's not true. I don't think I'll do any wargaming while I'm in Iceland, but I'm going to be happy for the holiday. Anyway, before we get going, I want to say this episode is sponsored by Cube4Me. Cube4Me has quickly established themselves as the premier providers of storage solutions for historical board games. We're talking counter trays and card boxes. One of the best things about their trays is they come not just in a variety of configurations, 4 spots by 5, 4 by 3, 3 by 5, whatever, but also a variety of depths. And one tray can serve as the lid for the next if you're looking to save space and eliminate box lid lift. Check out my website or newsletter for my link. Use that to order their trays. They'll know I'll sent you, and not only that, you'll get 5% off your order. So, really, you can't afford not to try them. News. The live cardboard live streams continue to go well. Since the last podcast, we've had the one you'll hear much of today that I did with David Thompson, and then one on clever wargame mechanics, where I went through maybe 15 or so games and looked at what made them interesting, sometimes even unique. Links to these, as well as everything else, are in the show notes, as well as in the newsletter. The Charles S. Roberts ballots are live. I think I might have mentioned that last time, but go vote. It's your duty. Let's make this as representative as possible. PunchedCon, one of the best conventions in the UK, wrapped up a couple weeks ago. Fellow pusher Peter McClymont was there and did a great write-up of the event, including tons of pictures. Check it out on the Pushing Cardboard website. A few weeks ago, I saw someone on BGG mention that they thought a Discord server dedicated to blind swords would be a good idea, but they didn't know how to go about making one. So I made one and made it open to everyone. It's been a great success. We've even got a couple designers stopping by to share thoughts and ask questions. So if you're into blind swords, join us. It's open to everyone. Have you heard of a Spanish company called Bellica 3rd Generation? I was interested in them as they're the current publisher of a Coral Sea game I'm interested in. If you don't know them, now's your chance, as they finally have an updated website. Check it out. A few announcements about upcoming games. Last episode, I mentioned Mike Nagel and his new publishing imprint, Relative Range. He had a World War II tactical game ready for order. The news here is he now has 2 expansions for it, one for the British and one for the Italians. Hopefully the British box includes Commonwealth units as well. That'll make me happy. Narvik 1940 is a new game from the not-so-cleverly named Tactics and Strategy. I'm interested in it, partly because I'm interested in that particular sideshow campaign, but also because fellow podcaster Mark Johnston of Wargames to Go is doing a series on Norway, so my interest is piqued, and I wanted to pass that along to him as well. Dissimula, the Italian publisher that brought us from Salerno to Rome and Give Us Victories, has a new game, Sicilia 1943 Operation Husky. Like so many of the newer European publishers, Sergio Sciavi and Dissimula make beautiful components. I'm really looking forward to this one. Compass just wrapped up the Kickstarter for Volume 3 of their Combat series. If you missed the Kickstarter, they generally have a late pledge option, so you can still get the good price. The day it was announced that the United States was reducing the tariffs on Chinese goods from 145 to 30%, I got word that Revolution was immediately getting their latest blind swords game shipped home. Obviously, they're banking on getting it back to America before the tariff situation changes again. So that one would be Gettysburg, the first day. It's not available for order on their website yet, but I'm sure it will be. Keep your eye open. And finally, another GMT update. Late news, just got the email. Their big news was that their sale went well. It generated enough cash flow to keep things going. Their international shipping project is still moving forward. So that's good news for us in Canada and Europe. They're still looking for an American printer. It seems die cutting is the main problem. And then after that, they come up against either not meeting the minimum print run for some large printers or needing more than the maximum for some smaller ones. They feel they're a bit like a Goldilocks, I guess. They have 2 new digital games in the works: Saratoga, a title from the Battles of the American Revolution series from Mark Miklos, and Space Corps by John Butterfield. I'm guessing that's going to be a big seller, big crossover appeal in those space games. Also, by Swords and Bayonets, the box of smaller GBACW games is now available to order. That's from Alan Dickerson, and should be a kind of an entry-level game to the or entry-level box for the GBACW series. And then finally, new on P500, a non-Zoc Bond game from Mark Simonich. At least I think it's no Zoc Bonds. It's not 40X in any case. It's Königgrätz 66, a major battle in the Austro-Prussian War. That's a war I know nothing about, so I look forward to seeing this game about it and learning something. This episode is also sponsored by Noble Knight Games. If there's an out-of-print game you're looking for, they're your best chance. If you're looking for used games to avoid the new and shrink price, they've got thousands. And if you're looking to sell games, they're your best choice as well. Check out the link in the show notes or the newsletter or the website, and use it to get to their store. That way they'll know I sent you. I'll get a little kickback, I'll spend it on games, I'll tell you about those games, and then you'll head back to buy more games. It's a virtuous circle. Speaking of new games, here's what I got new to my collection since last time we spoke. Not too many. All Our Brothers, Solferino, 1859 from Legion. Using the blind sword system for a game on a battle from the Second Italian War of Independence, another war I don't know much about. Pacific Fleet, The Decline and Fall of the Japanese Empire. This is an older game. I got this in a math trade. I mistakenly traded for a Japanese edition. At least it has some English translations in it. I'll see how it goes. And then another math trade pickup, War Chest, by today's guest, David Thompson. It looks to be the sort of game my daughter may play with me. She's fine with war games, but she likes them to be quick to learn and not too long to play, so I think it's going to fit the bill for her. And then finally, a couple of games from new publisher, or newish publisher, Form Square Games. These are the latest 2 boxes in their Limits of Glory series. They had the first one last year, Bonaparte's Eastern Empire, and the new ones are Volume 2 is Maida 1806, and then Volume 3 and 4 in one box is Santa Mora and Capri, two smaller games using the same system in the same box, double-sided map. So those were promo copies sent to me because I liked the first one so much. So you'll definitely be hearing more about those in the months to come. Okay, let's get on to our featured game. Let's take a look at Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Northern Theater, 1775 to 1777. Sometimes you let games pass you by for one reason or another. And this is one of those games for me. Well, I'd heard people really liked it. The title just never grabbed me. I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought it wasn't going to be enough of a war game. Maybe because when I first heard about it, I didn't yet know what a fantastic designer Amabel Holland is. For whatever reason, I gave it a pass. But I've since become a big fan of Holland Spiel games, and usually buy 1 or 2 or 3 during their annual Hollandaise sale. And this past year, I finally decided to give Supply Lines a try. And wow, I'm a fool for passing up on this earlier. This is a terrific game with some really novel mechanics. Components-wise, the map is 22 by 17, so about half of what you may think of as a standard wargame map. It's a point-to-point map with Quebec and Montreal in the north and Baltimore in the south. And the locations are divided into 3 types. Cities are the main spots. These are the only places that can potentially create fresh supplies, which are of utmost importance, as the game title suggests. They also give the defender a bonus in battle. And then there's forts, where you can't create supplies, but they can hold supplies, and they still give you that defensive bonus. And then finally, there are just points. These are farmland areas in between some cities and or forts. They don't generate supplies directly, but you need to have one adjacent that isn't under enemy control for your city to produce. As well, they can only hold as many supplies as a combat unit can carry, so you can't create a stockpile here like you can in cities and forts. And then there's also an at-sea box. This is for the crown player. They can use it as an intermediate stop when moving from port to port. very important for getting troops out of Nova Scotia, where they generally arrive. The map also has a few tracks. There's a turn track, which also shows which turns are winter, and the late war turns, where the Patriot player gets no new reinforcements. It has a pass track. This is an interesting device. Each turn, the players each roll a die to see who goes first, who gets initiative. High roll goes first, and that's also where the marker goes on the pass track. Play goes back and forth with the initiative player going first, and at some point one of the players will not want to move anymore or simply want to limit their opponent's moves, and they'll pass. Every time a player passes, this marker gets moved down one spot to the left, and when it gets to 0, the turn ends. Of course, if both players pass consecutively, the turn ends as well. There's a support track for the Patriot player. It moves back and forth depending on game events like winning or losing battles or surrendering units. The higher it goes, the more reinforcements the Patriot player is likely to get each turn, and vice versa. If it makes it all the way to the top, it's an automatic victory for the Patriots. And finally, there's a reinforcement track for the British player. Each turn, they may choose to bring on a fairly substantial number of reinforcements, but each time they do so, the number of victory cities they need to hold to win at the end increases by 1. They'll surely need some, but do they need them all? That's a big question. The map is attractive and perfectly functional, my favorite combination. Paper map, as is usual for Holland games. The other components include tiny cubes representing supply, green cubes for food, and tan cubes for war supplies. You'll spend the green ones to move and the tan ones to attack or defend. The unit counters themselves are nice, thick, chunky laser-cut ones that you might be familiar with from Holland or Blue Panther. I really like these. No corner clipping needed. They feel like these sort of extra substantially big counters, or thick anyway. Other than a few markers, the units are pretty simple. Each side has 3 leaders represented by tricorns, and then a whack of infantry counters with simple strength points on them. They run from 1 to 4 strength. You can swap them in and out, making change as needed. So, how does it all work? Well, let's first take a look at the victory conditions. Both sides can win instantly if their opponent finds themselves with no leader on the map. The Patriot can win by getting their support marker all the way to its final space, as I mentioned before, or by waiting out the Crown player who has the onus of attack. The Crown player wins by controlling the number of cities indicated on the Crown reinforcement track. Remember, every time the Crown brings on reinforcements, this number increases. Or they can win early by taking New York and Albany, or New York, Albany, and Philly if the Declaration of Independence has happened. All right, let's take a look at the sequence of play. First up is the supply phase. Key to the game, as the title suggests. Each city you control generates 2 food and 1 war supply in its space, as long as it's occupied by an army and is adjacent to a point space that doesn't have an enemy army in it. This is why those point spaces between cities and forts are so important. Also in the supply phase, both sides can move their supplies. You can move supplies in unlimited amounts through spaces connected by your armies. You want to get supplies to the front so that your leading units can move, which costs food, or attack, which costs war supply. Cities and forts can hold 8 supplies of any type. A point can only hold the number of supplies equal to the number of units in that space plus 1. Although many more can move through that space. It's only at the end when you have to make sure that you're not overstacked on supply. At the end of the supply phase, the Crown player may request reinforcements at the cost of, as we said, increasing their victory requirements. And those reinforcements will eventually enter at the top of the map in Nova Scotia. Then it's the initiative phase. This is a simple roll-off, as I mentioned. If it's tied, the initiative is determined by whether or not the independence declaration has been made yet. The pass marker gets placed on its track on the number corresponding to the highest of the 2 dice. And then it's the impulse phase. This is where the action happens. The player who won the initiative selects either an army to activate or passes. If they pass, as I mentioned, the pass marker moves up 1 space to the on the track, well, actually to the left on the track, and if it gets to 0, the turn is over. But if they do an impulse, then after the first player does their activation, then the second player does theirs, and it passes back and forth, activating 1 army at a time until both players pass in succession or the pass marker hits 0. An activated army has several options. They can march or dig in. If they have a leader, they can attack. If it's the Crown player, they can transport units via sea, bombard, or even destroy a city. The Patriots can skirmish. Most of that is pretty self-evident. Moving just means moving units from a single army, a single space, though they don't all have to move in the same direction. You activate an army in one space, and any of the units in that army can move any direction or no direction at all. Attacking is simply moving your units into an adjacent enemy-occupied space. The defender can accept or refuse battle. If battle occurs, the attacker has to spend war supplies to earn battle dice, 1 supply per die, unless attacking a city or fort, where it's 2 supplies per die. The defender, if they accept battle, they also have to pay war supply to get their dice. And they roll first, and they eliminate 1 unit from the attacker for every 1 or 2 rolled. They also reduce the attacker's number of battle dice by 1 for every 2 units that they eliminate. And then the attacker rolls with whatever they've got left. This is similar to the defending rolls, with the exception that when the crown is attacking, they hit on a 1, 2, or 3. Obviously, as the line troops of the British are just better. Whoever has the most units left wins. Depending on who is the attacker and if there was a defending leader present, the support marker is moved up or down its track. If the defender wins, the attacker is bounced back to where they attacked from. If the attacker wins, the defender must make a morale check, and the bigger the difference in the remaining number of units on each side, the harder it is for the defender to pass that check. If they fail, they have to retreat, and the attacker takes the space. Also, the crown player always gets 2 chances to pass the morale check, where the patriot has to do it on a single roll. So it is possible to win the battle, not dislodge the enemy. Anyway, back and forth the impulses go, both sides moving or attacking mostly, until the pass marker hits 0. And then it's the final phase of each turn, the end turn phase. Any dig-in markers are removed. If it's one of the 2 winter turns in the game, the Patriot army disbands. You really have to plan for this. Patriot armies with a leader lose half their units. Patriot armies in victory cities lose all but 2 units. And then all other Patriot armies are removed along with any supplies they carried. The good news is that in every other end turn, the Patriot musters some new units. They draw chits from a cup with city names on them, and as long as the city isn't occupied by the crown, they get 2 units there. So their army really grows between winters. Winter turns are also special in that no supplies are generated, and each side may only do 1 attack. So not a lot happens in winter. I think the pass track and the crown reinforcement tracks are fairly clear. The other track is the Patriot support track. I barely mentioned it. As I said, wins and losses move it back and forth, as do surrenders, which can happen if an army is supposed to retreat but it has nowhere to retreat to. Support starts really low, but it will grow. And then once it's about 4 spaces or 5 spaces to the positive, the Declaration of Independence is made, which shifts the crown auto victory conditions a bit. And then if the support marker goes up another 4 spaces to the end, it will hit the alliance with the French, and the Patriots will be declared the winner right then. Anyway, a fairly straightforward mechanics in this game. The devil, of course, is in the playing. Moving supplies is critical, but you have to have at least 1 unit in every space along the supply line. You can't move supplies through an empty space. Now, of course, a long supply line means less units available to get to the front. As well, the Patriot supply lines, of course, will be ravaged on both winter turns. So, as it's all about the supply lines, you'll be thinking that you want to try and cut your opponent's supply lines. Given the map, this is almost impossible in the early going, as the north part of the map is mostly laid out along 2 north-south lines without a lot of access to come in from the side. The Crown does start with a few units halfway down in Boston, and they can try to break out of there, but their survival is pretty dicey as all the rest of the Crown units start up in Quebec and have to make their way down. There's a really interesting map thing. Speaking of Boston, there's an empty point connected to Cambridge, Boston, and Providence. And for the latter 2, it's the only empty point. So if you attempt to generate supplies in either Boston or Providence, you need to either have a unit in that empty point, or at least have that empty point be empty. The Crown starts with units in Boston, and the Patriots start with units in Providence. So that little point is key for both. Boston is disadvantaged in that they can also be attacked from Cambridge, but on the other hand, even if Boston can't generate supplies, they're a port, and they can be supplied by sea transport, something only the Crown player can do. So anyway, that's just one example of the sort of feisty puzzles you face in this game. And given the need to garrison in each link of the supply chain, you're always going to feel like you don't have enough units to get where you want to go. The winter turns are obviously key as they give the Crown a chance to break through the deadlock each spring, but also with the random mustering of the Patriot units, you never know where the Colonials will suddenly be a little stronger than you planned for. Oh, one last thing. The Patriot receives no reinforcements after the second winter. So if you're playing the Rebels, you have to decide along the way whether you're going to really push hard to secure an auto victory by the end of 1776 or try to hang on to the end of 1777. Similarly, the British player has to decide how many times they'll draw from the reinforcement pool as each time increases the number of victory cities needed. You're surely going to take the first batch of reinforcements right off the bat, and probably the second, I would think. But after that, you have a similar decision to the Patriots about trying to get a victory with less cities as quickly as possible, or playing for the longer game where you beat up the Patriots when they're down to the last 4 turns and they get no reinforcements. So kind of big meta decisions on both sides. Anyway, as you can tell, I really like this game. It's a perfect game for an evening, maybe 3 hours. Straightforward mechanics, but it doesn't feel simple in the least. In fact, it feels like you're constantly making decisions. I'm happy to say the game has a vassal module. It hasn't been updated since 2018 or so, but there's very little automation beyond the draw cup for the Patriot reinforcement cities. So I think it probably should still be workable. I haven't tried it yet, but I hope to soon. I hope to wrangle somebody into a PBEM game of this with me. Anyway, that's it. Check it out. Supply Lines of the American Revolution, Northern Theater. Okay, time for our interview. It was a real treat to get designer David Thompson on a recent live stream. It did leave me in a bit of a quandary. While it was great to bring him to the live YouTube audience, I didn't want you regular podcast listeners to miss out, so I'm including it in this episode. But I have to say, as it was originally video, and I had a little slideshow with some of the game boxes of the games we were going to talk about, there's a few references in the audio to photos. So in those cases where it's not immediately clear what we're talking about, I've just edited in a brief description of what the game is. It's going to sound a little goofy, but I think it'll help you understand what we're talking about. Anyway, the piece starts just before I introduce David because, you'll hear at that point there's a photo of a beautiful dog on the screen. Do you know this dog? I have to tell you a story about this dog. This is Kennedy. Many of you might know Mike Zilla Blitz. Mike, this is Mike's dog, Kennedy, and Kennedy. Beautiful dog, but has a real problem with separation anxiety. Gets really nervous and sad whenever Mike and his wife and family leave the house. But Mike tends to, when he listens to my podcast, not this, but the audio podcast, he listens to it on his speakers. He just says, "Alexa, power up the Pushing Cardboard podcast." Anyway, he noticed that Kennedy loves the sound of my voice. So Kennedy gets chills right out, gets very calm whenever the podcast is on. So Mike let me know that whenever he and his wife have to leave the house and leave the dog alone, they turn on the Pushing Cardboard podcast, just a few old episodes, just so Kennedy will be calm while they're out of the house. So it made me think that probably Kennedy is probably listening to more Pushing Cardboard than anybody. This is so I present to you Kennedy as the all-time greatest Pushing Cardboard fan. Anyway, so I want to say thanks, Kennedy. You're a lovely dog. I'm glad to have you. Okay, well, it's time to bring on David. Oh, let's make this look prettier. There we go. This is David Thompson, my friend and fantastic designer. How are you?
I'm great. That was the best story. I think, I don't know, maybe the best story I've ever heard. That was awesome. Oh my goodness.
When Mike told me, I was pretty happy for sure.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
I didn't expect a dog to be my all-time favorite listener, but I'll take it. We've known each other for a couple years now. We first actually met down in San Diego, I think, two Novembers ago.
Yeah.
And you let me know. Actually, I think even prior to that you were a big podcast listener and that you liked Pushing Cardboard and War Games to Go as podcasts. So for both Mark Johnson, who was at that San Diego HisCon, and myself, it was like, my God, we get to meet David Thompson, who actually listens to our podcast not because he's trying to promo something, but just because he likes it. So that was sweet.
No, it was amazing. I probably discovered your podcast from Mark, because I've known Mark for 10 years probably now.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, War Games to Go is one of the reasons I got into War Games. Mark's podcast, and so I probably heard about yours through. I can't remember for sure, but I probably heard about you Pushing Cardboard through Mark. And I definitely feel like, to me, the two podcasts scratch the same itch. It's a guy who I enjoy listening to you guys talk, and you're usually by yourselves, and you're just kind of going through what you've played and news and that kind of stuff, and it's real. Just I'm like Kennedy. It's like very easy to listen to.
Well, Mark was very helpful to me when I first started as well. When I first started to get the idea that I wanted to do some podcasting, I'd been listening to podcasts a lot, and I knew what I liked and I didn't like. And one thing I loved about his podcast was that his audio quality was so good. It was like it didn't change if he had a guest on. It didn't go in and out. And so many of podcasters, we're all a bunch of amateurs, right? So I don't expect anybody to be perfect, but a lot of the podcasters, their audio quality is just all over the place. And so before I even started, I wrote him and said, "Hey, I love your podcast. What's your gear setup? What's your software setup? What do you do?" So, and he gave me a few tips, and it was all good. And of course, I'd been listening to his podcast for years by then anyway. So he's one of those guys where you listen to his voice and he just feels like an old friend.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, it's sweet that way. So anyway, So we met each other back in fall of 2023. We actually sat down and had an interview for the podcast, and we talked about everything that was going on at that point. I think maybe Undaunted Battle of Britain maybe was the most recent game at that point.
Yeah. So
I thought tonight, we're going to talk about your American Civil War game a little later, because that's a huge interest to me. But I made a little list of all the things you've come up with in the time since I spoke to you last, because my God, nobody can be more prolific than you. You're like a machine. But you're like me. You get up like super early, right? You like this is.
I do. I do get up very early. I usually get up like 3:34 to start working. Now I usually go to bed early too, though. So that's that's the trick. But yeah, that time before the day gets started is really my design time for sure.
I get up super early, but then I come home early and have a little nap. So that's how I tend to sleep twice in a day rather than going to bed early.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, let's pop this up see if I can make this work. Yeah, that'll probably do, I think. First graphic is for Battle Card, a printed home solitaire game. So this is the first thing I saw that came out after that. But I had this feeling, like I ordered this, and I've played 3 or 4 of them. It's totally fun little quick thing, right? It's basically you pay $5 and you get a print and play of some solitaire war games that all you need is to print them out, and you use dice as markers. But there's something about this that made me think like that this project went back to like COVID days or something that you'd started on it much earlier?
I can't. That's a good question. I can't remember exactly where it started. There's a game called Battle Card Market Garden, which Nils, so this is a project. Battle Card is a project that Nils Johansson and I did together for a postcard design competition. And
right.
So that's where Market Garden came from. And it was really just an exercise. Well, first of all, I love working with Nils. So any chance I get, I'll work with Nils. But it was really an exercise of like, can we distill these, usually operational level conflicts down into like 5 minutes? Like what are the absolute most critical, if you were to list like 5 bullets about each of these, whatever it is, what does it have to have? And so that's what the Battle Card series was for us, is just this like crazy design challenge of distillation down to its absolute essence.
Right. And yeah. And then I think you nailed it. Like in terms of what you're trying to do, they're exactly that. And you're right. Nils is a fantastic graphic designer. It's like, I'd be eager to work with him if I ever, could afford a graphic artist to work on any of my stuff. Mark Herman's here tonight. Welcome, Mark. Nice to have another designer stop by, and another one that has been on the podcast. Terrific. So that was the first one I saw. Then there was this. This was a much bigger deal. This is graphic Undaunted Callisto. This is where you took the Undaunted system in a completely new direction.
Yeah, so everybody was asking for Pacific, and we gave them sci-fi instead.
But I have a feeling like that they were just as happy, right? Like people love sci-fi.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure that you and I have talked about this before. We've since 2019 we've made an Undaunted game every year, and if you look at Undaunted. We try not to make it. When I say we, it's me and Trevor, right? So Trevor Benjamin, the co-designer, and I, we try not to make it a reskin. Everyone has to have something truly new, right? Whether it's scale in North Africa, or the legacy campaign system in Stalingrad, or the air combat, which is very different, Battle of Britain. And so we just wanted something completely different, and to be completely honest, the other thing was there was a very large number of people who said, I'm very interested in Undaunted, but I just don't really enjoy the historical war theme. And so, I mean, this was to be completely honest. Some of this was to provide a game to that audience too. But really, it was giving me and Trevor something fresh to work on, so that we don't get too stale with the system.
That makes perfect sense, because in terms of your design output, you've always been someone who straddles the line between historical simulation, war type games, and more hobby games. Mm-hmm. Like even the original Undaunted, the very first one, I always thought of that as a game that sort of will appeal to us grognards, but might also appeal to people who don't usually play historical military games for whatever reason.
Yeah, I always say that for Undaunted specifically, of my games, I get a lot of people who are wargamers who thank me because they're able to play it with their non-wargaming spouse or friends or whatever. And that's like and kids. I get a lot of wargamers who play with their kids. And that's like the best compliment I can get. Because, maybe some of those people get brought into the wargaming hobby. Maybe they don't. It doesn't really matter. But it gives them somebody to play with that's with a crossover type game.
Right. Yeah. You're not the only one. Obviously, James does the.
There we go. Yeah.
Thing.
That's like the best I can get. Now, I will say this on Callisto, though, when it comes to historical, or the setting, is one thing I had been researching in the years leading up to Callisto was the West Virginia mine wars, right? So early 1900s, and there is definitely a thinly veiled inspiration for the setting in Callisto from the West Virginia mine wars.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and a couple of people have actually, like a couple of people on Board Game Geek have actually made that connection, which was the coolest thing. Yeah, I haven't really talked about it publicly, and they they mentioned it, and so I was like, oh well, that's awesome. That's really cool that it came through.
That's totally awesome, and totally awesome that you used like a seminal, kind of horrible event, and you know, like just shitty union busting and all that stuff that was going on. I'm sure we're talking about Matewan or Matawan, or however you say that, and all that. How clever of you to put all that into a sci-fi game. That's fantastic. Okay, well, that's Callisto. And then graphic war story, Occupied France. This one, I don't have this. This is the one that where you're basically, it's like a write your own story sort of a game in a way.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, we got to get you a copy. So I'll talk to Osprey. But
right.
but yeah, the easiest way to describe it so that people kind of get an understanding is choose your own adventure, because most people have played or know what when we choose your own adventure. You know, you read a passage and it gives you an option and you make your choice. Now it's not that straightforward, because you've got characters and they have skills and you make skill checks and that kind of stuff. But the thing that everybody has really responded to positively about War Story is, so it's set in occupied France, and you're SOE agents, and you're going behind, you know, working with the resistance and stuff. But when there's combat in the game, you do set out some kind of small basic maps and some pieces, and so you're kind of tracking the combat on a map, but it never leaves the narrative of the book. So everything that you're doing, you're reading about the combat, and you're making those same choices and skill checks in the narrative. And so it winds up playing two things that I think are nice. One, the rules overhead is almost non-existent. You can almost just pick up the book and just start playing, which is really nice. And then it just provides a very different experience to like conflict than any other war themed game would give you.
It sounds a bit like John Butterfield's old game Ambush, except completely modernized and streamlined. But that same thing where you take the choose your own adventure, but you have characters, you have attributes, you have skills. It's more than choose your own adventure. But you definitely had to go back and forth between the little paragraphs and the board, and you're constantly. It's more like a war game, an old hex and counter war game for sure.
Yep.
Well, that's cool. I should mention. It's funny you said get me a copy of that. I recently did a math trade. I just do Canadian math trades. There's a whole separate thing from the U.S. ones, and then you don't have to worry about big shipping going either way. And I got 2 games, but that was one.
Oh, that's awesome! That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm thinking my son will probably play this with me. He's he's 22, but his the kind of games he likes are he likes games that are low rules overhead, or not easy, but like sort of right where you pitch things is kind of he's your target audience in a way. So that's great.
That's awesome.
I should mention I'm a terrible math trader sometimes, though. I did trade for one of your games previously, Resist, and I didn't read the fine print, and I got this is Canada, right? It came from Quebec. It was a French version, so I got a French version of Resist. Oh shit! And then I just went online and ordered an English version, like fresh, new and shrink from the publisher, because it's so stupid. But I bring that up because in this math trade, I've always been looking for this. This specific war game that was originally published in Japan, then came out in America. I think it's just called Pacific Command or something like that. Anyway, it was Pacific Command. Here it comes. I got the Japanese version. So I'm obviously just the worst at reading the fine print. I see a title I want and I get so excited and I order it. Anyway, so there you go. Graphic female Soviet pilots. Next up, this one now. This is not quite even out yet, right? We're just waiting for this. This is Night Witches for anybody who doesn't immediately recognize the photograph. Oh, we've lost your audio. Nah, not yet.
Me know.
Now, there you go. There we go. Yep, all good.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I actually knocked my mic out when I was laughing about your Japanese.
I know. I get excited about new games.
So Night Witches is a game that I'm designing with Liz Davidson. It's our first game that we've designed together. We've actually subsequently worked on some more, and this one's going to be published by Fort Circle. One plug I'll make real quick, since we're talking about Liz, is it was announced that she won the Golden Geek for her
Golden
podcast.
Geek.
Yeah, so congratulations to Liz for that. It's well deserved. Great podcast.
Her and Dan Thoreau, I think, were like 1 and 2, and Dan's fantastic as well. It was like two people that totally intersect with our historical and military wargaming space. I don't expect anybody from even close to our world to reach those heights at the Geek. So good on both of them.
I know it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome for those two to be up there. That's just, as you say, that's great for our hobby. But yeah, so Night Witches is a game that Liz and I have been working on for a few years now. We finished the design probably a year and a half ago or so, and it's been with Ian O'Toole to do the art. So he's been sending us a lot of it, the boards, player boards, that kind of stuff. And we're actually meeting with him early tomorrow morning, to record a podcast for Liz's podcast about the art process and the graphic design process for the game. So I think we've also been chatting a lot with Raina Pennington, who's our historical consultant. So she's a professor. She used to be a professor at Norwich. She specializes in military history, women military history. She taught Soviet military history. She traveled to Russia, former Soviet Union, to interview some of the Night Witches, and she's a hardcore gamer. And I mean, like she plays way more complex. I'm not a heavy gamer. She is. And she and I actually originally met not because of Night Witches, but because she was using Pavlov's house in her class. And so I was like, okay, well, this is a match made in heaven, right? So it's been an amazing project to work on, and I was at Buckeye Game Fest, which is a convention pretty local to me, this past weekend, and I think 3 or 4 people came up to me and asked me where Night Witches was. Right. So people are waiting
for a long time. Right?
I know.
People want it.
Yep. So,
but this will just be tangentially to the publication, though. But with the whole tariff situation, it's coming from Fort Circle. Fort Circle gets their printing done in China, so they must be. Kevin Bertram must be like trying to decide whether to get things printed right now or not, or maybe everything's just on hold. I don't know what's going on.
He sent, Kevin's really like open about all the business stuff, right? He's very open about it.
About it. He just lays the numbers out.
Yep. And he just sent out an update to his blog talking about how they're dealing. I think it was his blog. I don't think it was an update to his crowdfunding projects, but talking about his sort of like current place as it relates to tariffs and the impact it's having on some of his projects and stuff. So, I mean, we're fortunate. We're not close to sending it to the printers, right? We still got to finish art and laying out the rules and all of that. But yeah, I don't think he's choosing to print something right now. I think I can safely speak for him and say you probably want to hold off on that.
Yeah, that's. I only brought it up because like you said, people have been asking you about this game, but that's going to be another way that it possibly can be held up is if he has to, put a hold on his whole printing schedule for a while he finds out what he's, if he can still print that way or not. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. I should also say, thanks to everybody who's come out tonight. It's good to see you all in the chat. If anybody, if you have a question for David, don't hesitate to pop it in the chat. I'll try and notice it and get it on the screen so that he can have a look for sure. The, the 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 Night Witches project. This is like it. It seems to me with all of your historical games, they either mean something personal to you, like Undaunted Normandy. I think you maybe had a relative that was a connection to the unit that's referenced there, or there's always got to be. It seems with you, there's always got to be some kind of thing that hits you personally that makes you want to do it. It's not like you're just going to go do a Bulge game because you want to do a Bulge game, right?
Yeah.
So what was it about the Night Witches that grabbed you, or did it grab Liz and she grabbed you, or how did that work?
So I make a list, when I'm reading about, so usually it's reading, when I'm reading about something, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That could be a game or whatever. And I'll put it on a list. And there was a period of time where I had thought about, I'd really like to do a series of games about women in World War II, because there's so many stories about women and there's, the roles that they played in World War II. And depending on where, depending on the country you're in, whether it's the UK where they did almost everything, right, short of being riflemen, to the US where it was like less so, or the Soviet Union where they essentially did everything, right? I mean, it runs the gamut. But there was a period where I was thinking about that, and at the time, the Night Witches were one of the topics that I was thinking about, and so it was kind of there. It was just sitting there on the list of possibilities, and that was before Liz and I had even met. And then we met, and we had been talking. So Liz and I get up early, right? That's our thing. We were both awake at like 4 a.m, and so we became friends. I met her not long after she started her channel, and she covered Pavlov's House, so there's continued connection. And so when she covered it, I reached out and said, hey, thanks, or whatever. And we got to chatting, and then we just started chatting every morning because we're the only ones awake, working or whatever. And then slowly over time, we started talking about her just starting to design, and I just kind of floated the idea of the Night Witches to her, and then that took off. Right, we had to that's something we had to do, and that's one thing about Liz and me. Everything that we've landed on, we'll talk about ideas, we'll bat it back and forth, but one of us mentions something and the other one will immediately respond. Those are the ones that we've really taken to. We kind of both know instantly, hey, this is a thing. But it's one of those things, like, just in general, the answer to your question is, I definitely don't ever seek out topics, right? It's just, that's something that hits me when I'm reading about it or whatever. And I know that I have to make a game if I can't stop thinking about it. Like, it won't let me go, right? Otherwise, if I'm reading about something, I'm like, oh, that sounds good. If I could forget about it, that means it doesn't need to be a game that I have to make.
Right. Yeah,
for sure.
Fair enough. So it's like something that gets it's like a burr in your saddle that you got to do it or it's going to just keep itching you, right?
Yeah, but usually it's those weird stories, like unusual or very personal stories, that are things that really strike me. And as you know, it's usually, not always, but usually like a very zoomed in kind of personal scale level is what I'm interested in.
Right. Yeah. Like zoomed in, like Pavlov's House was, mm-hmm. or Landsworth Ridge, like that stuff is pretty tight. Thinking about your ideas about, I was thinking about this women in World War II. I was thinking a game about, like, it seems like the women's contribution to what happened at Bletchley Park in terms of code breaking was huge. And I thought, but how could you make a game about that? All us men are too stupid to understand what those women were doing.
Yes. Yeah. When I lived in the UK, we lived probably less than an hour away from Bletchley Park. So it's a place that we visited often, because when we had people visiting, you take them to Bletchley Park, because everybody always goes to the same places, and some people do know of Bletchley Park, some people don't, but there's a difference when you go there. It really is an amazing tour, right, to see what they were able to do. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, whether it's women working at Bletchley Park, I mean, I've thought about making a game about the British air defenses during World War II, like the ground-based air defense network. Which, the women did everything except for be the one to pull the trigger on the guns, basically, right?
So, yeah. That whole air defense network was unheard of anywhere else.
Right.
Where they understood they developed a system so that they understood what was coming at them before it got there. Radar was a thing, but it was like super primitive radar, right? It was like it couldn't tell altitude, it couldn't tell anything else. But that's a great story, fantastic story. I think this is all the games that. Oh no, graphic Line of Fire, Burnt Moon. This one is now. Is this out or not yet? This
comes out next month.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is one I didn't even know about because I only saw it on BGG and went, wait a minute, I haven't even seen about this.
Yeah.
Is this more like a sci-fi game?
Here's the deal. So this is the first year since 2019 that we have not made an Undaunted game for Osprey. So what this game is it takes place in the same sort of thematic universe as Undaunted 2200 Callisto. From a storyline perspective, it takes it's set a couple of years after that. This is, imagine a lane battler game. So you've played Battle Line, or do you know Battle Line, right?
Yeah. I know lane battler games.
You know lane battlers, right? So imagine a lane battler with 5 lanes, but the cards you're playing into and how you're playing those cards is built on the Undaunted DNA. So this is sort of like Undaunted without the board, as a lane battler, set in the sci-fi setting for Undaunted 22.
So it's still got that deck building component in it then.
Yep, absolutely. 100%, yeah.
Well, fantastic. I mean, Callisto, that was a fairly big hit, right? That was a good. It's
done well, yeah.
So this it makes sense to have some sort of a follow-up for it. That's,
And the timing is right now with the cost, with the cost of shipping and everything. This comes in a nice little box. I mean, it's essentially 2 decks of cards. I mean, there's a little bit of other bits to it, but it's
right. So it's tiny. It's a small box. It's going to have a small. It is Liz. It is Liz from Beyond Solitaire. Christoph. That's Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire. That's it.
Yeah.
She was the co-designer of Night Witches. We talked about it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, co-designer. Like, I want to be very clear. Co-designer, not involved. She was at least as much as involved as I am, if not more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you two have more things up your sleeve?
Yeah, so we have a game that I don't know if it's okay to talk about who the publisher is, but I can talk about the game. So the game is it's called Queen of Spies. So it's interesting because it's not based on a specific historical group. It's more of a game inspired by the story of intelligence networks in World War I and II that were oftentimes heavily influenced by women, but you didn't know it at the time because of the roles that they were playing in those intelligence networks. So in this one, we've set it in a fictional World War I Belgian town where you are the Queen of Spies. You're running a local network of spies. So it's a solitaire only game. It's sort of our follow up, and it uses a little bit of the Night Witches push your luck bag building DNA that we designed for that game, but in a completely different way. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about for that game is it tells a really interesting emergent narrative because it's set in this little town, right? So all the people you're using, all the agents you're recruiting, and the tasks they're going on, it's not narrative in the way like War Story is literally reading a narrative. It's more the way that the mechanisms and the theme sort of integrate that tells a cool emergent narrative.
I've read in the last few years, I read a few nonfiction books about spycraft, World War II intelligence, and there's so many agents that were women. It's and also there's that, and then going back to the Bletchley Park thing, they're all also told to not say anything about it after it took years before they were allowed to even mention anything. Like those women who worked at Bletchley Park, that they told people they were stenographers at first, like a shoe company or something, right? It's like nobody knew what they actually did.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. They, sometimes, I mean, obviously, independent of whether they were men or women or whatever, it was classified, and so you can't talk about it. That's fine. Many of the men that were involved with that type of stuff were the military officers involved. So clearly they were involved with something, and but many of the women, yeah, absolutely. What they did was classified. They couldn't talk about it, and their story didn't get out until it was revealed many, many, many years later, right? 25, 30, years later. So, yeah, a lot of women doing important things, but because of their roles were so sensitive, it just couldn't be known.
Well, yeah, and I remember reading one about a woman. I think she was the wife of somebody at the embassy in Lisbon or something like that. But she was a total. She was a wife of I think maybe somebody in the German embassy, but she was an agent for the Allies. It's like, the danger people put themselves in is like unimaginable to us now, right? We live such easy, pampered lives.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree. When you're reading about it, you're like, is this really true? Can this really be, it's very hard to imagine that now, for sure.
Yeah, it's like you're looking at a James Bond thing without all the gadgets, but that level of danger, it's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes me totally grateful.
Yeah.
Grateful more than anything, I suppose.
Yeah.
But also makes me wonder, like, could I have ever done anything? There's nothing in my life that tests my mettle the way these people were tested for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, after that happy note, what else are you? That's what you're working on with Liz. What else are you working on? You must have something up your sleeve with Trevor, at least, if not, 4 other people.
Well, that's how I'm able to get so much done. Is everything that I do is a co-design, and so the co-designer does all the work, and then they let me put my name on it. I just slide them a check, and they. But so I'll cover this quickly because that way I'm not offending any co-designers or publishers. So so this next month is Line of Fire. The other game that I have coming out this year from Osprey is General Orders Sengoku Jedi. So it's feudal Japan follow-up to the original General Orders. So that'll be a couple of months from now. Super excited about that. That's another co-design with Trevor being published by Osprey. I really enjoy General Orders. I think it's a fun little game. And
Me
so
too.
hopefully people dig what we've done with the system. Chung-Ha is technically, still on the way from GMT, like it's been for years now. Jeff Engelstein and I co-designed that one. So solitaire game about the Ming voyages. You have War Chest there behind you. We've got the next expansion coming out in the future. I don't know. It's AEG actually, just like Fort Circle, issued a comment about tariffs recently, and they said they're basically not shipping anything. They're just gonna like so many other publishers, they're just warehousing their stuff for now.
Right.
So we'll see. But that will be on Kickstarter at some point in the future. I think that's all the stuff that's public. Like everything that we've talked about tonight so far, the designs are complete. I don't have any more work to do other than like checking development and files and that stuff. The actual game design is complete, and those are with publishers that are coming out in the future. So all the other stuff I can't really talk about yet.
Totally good. That's plenty. That's more than most humans. So before we're going to talk about your American Civil War game in a minute, but before we go there, let's how much you do so much design work with so many different co-designers. Like you say, you're always working with co-designers. How much time does that give you to still play? I see sometimes you post you're playing this or that with your daughters, but from talking to you before, just like Mark, I've spoken with him before, and like all the good designers I talk to, you say you play games, and the ones that I'm dubious about are the guys who say, "Oh, I don't play anymore. I'm too busy working on my own stuff." So you're still playing. What kind of stuff are you playing?
So you're right. I do play with my kids as much as they'll allow it. Now, I've told you this before. My oldest one, my 16-year-old daughter, she'll play like social deduction games. My son used to be my like war chest partner, like 1v1 type guy. and I've kind of lost him to video games. My 14-year-old daughter was my last holdout. She would play anything. She would play war games. She'd play anything with me. And now she still likes playing games, but she's a very busy 14-year-old. So that's difficult now to kind of schedule. So local to me, I have two guys that I play with quite a bit. They're my two local gaming buddies. And so we usually get together. We try to get together once a month. It doesn't always work out. That's usually like kind of an all-day Saturday thing. When we get together, it's absolutely glorious because we're all omni gamers. We're all willing to play anything, but we all sort of prefer the, war games or war themed with Euro sort of influence type games, right? So think something from like, we'll try to play something, a few months in a row. So like Maria was something we played for a few months, one of my all-time favorites. Versailles 1919. This Saturday, I'm getting together with one of them because one of them can't make it to play Combat Commander. So those are my local two guys for in-person gaming. I have a separate group that I play with maybe once every couple of months. That's more like Root. That's the kind of stuff we're playing. So that group is a little bit removed from wargaming, but it's still that sort of adjacent category, right?
Yeah, but that adjacent category would feed a designer like you who's trying to straddle the line between those two worlds, right? So you got to keep a row on each side of the canoe here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, totally agree. Yeah, that's perfect for me. And then really that's kind of it. I'll play online a little bit here and there. It's not I don't play online async ever. For me, gaming is like talking to the person. So if I'm totally cool with playing online as long as we're also live interacting.
Right.
But I did just having, in saying that, I posted this on Blue Sky. I played Maria on Rally the Troops that way a couple of days ago. And I finally started playing Rally the Troops, and man, holy cow, it's amazing, isn't it? Holy
it's fantastic.
Cow. Oh my gosh,
it's fantastic. Plus, like the games that they were lucky enough to get the rights to do so far, there's just some bangers in there.
I know.
Rommel in the Desert, one of my all-time favorite block games, is there.
Yeah.
Wilderness War is there. It's just there's all kinds of fantastic things in there.
Well, my first experience was playing Hammer of the Scots with Mark Johnson.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd never played Hammer of the Scots before either. So from that series, it's got Hammer, it's got Richard III and Julius Caesar. So that it's kind of got the big three from that little run that they did of those that style of games. Yeah. Well, I think publishers and designers who have the foresight to go, this might actually drive sales rather than steal sales. I totally believe that that'll get the interest in the games. Nobody's not going to buy a game that they could actually afford to play. Right.
That's just the way we are.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, maybe in some other hobby, but not in ours. You play it on there, and you're like, oh, I have to own this, and it'll just sit on your shelf forever, but you still own it. So
but you play it on there, and then you bring it back to your group and go like, I play this, like, we got to try this face to face because it was so good, right?
Yeah.
But I think that happens, and Mark Herman, he's got Rebel Fury out on Steam now. I played it on Steam. Fantastic implementation of that game too, and on Steam it only costs. It's like, I don't know, $10 or something, 15. I don't know, not much, but I could see somebody playing that on Steam and then going, I've got to play this live on the table with my friends, right? It's like, I think the one will feed back more often than not. I don't know. Call me a cockeyed optimist. Who knows? Well, I'm glad to see you got a couple of. Oh, look at that! He says is that five different games out there now? That wouldn't surprise me, given how prolific Mark is. I think I'm talking like two of the most prolific guys in the business tonight. Well, I guess now we should finally get to the thing I really wanted to talk to you about tonight, which is you've $5 for Rebel Fury. Holy smokes!
Whoa!
That Jesus!
Everybody, go buy Rebel Fury real quick. $5.
Yes, and Washington's War, maybe my all-time favorite CDG. It's between that and Unhappy King Charles, which, not surprisingly, is based on the bones of Washington's War rather than on the bones of Hannibal or Paths to Glory. It's like the English Civil War was built on Mark's idea. So, yeah, fantastic. I forgot about that. Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to talk about your you got for the first time ever an American Civil War game that you're working on. You got a publisher for it?
Yeah, Flying Pig is the publisher. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yep,
great.
Yeah, yep.
But I know just a little bit about it, but I know enough to know that this is going to be this is technically an American Civil War game, but it's going to be an American Civil War game, not like what people think when they hear American Civil War game. I'll toss it over to you to say, like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Well, I'll quickly say why it's different, and then we can kind of talk about the game in general. So the reason it's different is, I could not design like an operational level American Civil War game, because probably 97% of all war gamers know infinitely more about the ACW than I do, right? So me trying to design a game and not feeling like I'm just some sort of imposter as I'm doing it, that's ludicrous. And the other thing is, as we talked about before, I really enjoy like the zoomed in personal level, right? And so for me, I would have never considered in the past an ACW game if it wasn't for a topic like the one that this game, Rebels Against Rebellion, is about. So it gave me the opportunity to really deep dive in a subject that I felt like, okay, I have enough mastery in now that I can make a game that's respectful to the topic, right? And so that was very important to me. But really, the way this came about was Mark Walker at Flying Pig had reached out a couple of, first of all, I'm good friends with Herman Lutman, who works closely with Flying Pig, right? That's right. And so actually, talking about a person that's prolific, I mean,
yeah, it's true. He is. Yeah,
Herman's got his all beat. So
yeah, he's got it going on for sure.
Yeah, he's amazing,
and he crosses genres like you too. He's got that Plum Island stuff going, and
yeah. Herman and I are, I just saw him actually this past weekend at Buckeye Game Fest. We hung out quite a bit, and he and I are very similar in terms of like desire to sort of cross genres and willing to steal mechanisms. I don't care where it comes from. I'll use it. So Mark had reached out to me a couple of times about potentially working with Flying Pig, but genuinely, I was like, hey, Mark, I'm super busy, etc. Well, last year in the lead up to Origins, he said, hey, I'm coming with my daughter. She's going to be taking over the company. I want you to meet with us, just to see if you have a game idea. And so that was about the time that I had been researching this topic. And so what this topic is I wanted, and the other thing that was really the key inspiration is on Fred Serval's podcast, right? We have ways, right?
Yeah, fantastic. If anybody hasn't seen it, we're about to advance on your works or whatever it's called. Yeah. It's a long dive into Civil War games, one game per battle, basically, where they also at the same time look at the lost cause sort of idea, and to say, has this game maybe even advertently advanced the idea of the lost cause, or is it free of that kind of bias?
Right.
But it's great because you get to hear about all these games. Plus, Stewart is a Virginian and a historian,
Mm-hmm.
And, so well versed in ACW history. I listen to that podcast for his talk on history as much as I do for the games.
Well,
anyway.
That's really, that's really it, right, Stuart? I mean, there's a lot to love about that podcast, and everybody should subscribe and listen to it. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And really, Stuart's insight into the history is as good. It's just a lot. There's so much of it, so powerful. Well, so I'm from Savannah, Georgia originally, right? And I grew up there. I left when I was 18. That's when I joined the Air Force. And so I know all about the ACW in the South. And so when they're talking about the lost cause narrative, it really hits home, right? Like I experienced a lot of that. And so I started thinking, I was like, okay, we have the lost cause narrative and the impact it's had consciously and subconsciously on designers and the war game hobby. But what about people in the South who were loyalists or unionists, right? Their story has never been, to my knowledge, their story has never really been told in ACW games. And so that's what I wanted to explore. And so Rebels Against Rebellion is a game about Scott County, Tennessee. And so when the state of Tennessee seceded in 1861, Scott County, which is an Appalachian East Tennessee county, right on the border of Kentucky, they seceded from Tennessee. So they said, hey, we don't want any part of this. We're not playing this game. And when I say they seceded, I think they had like 517 people vote for the secession vote. And I think like 500 plus of them voted to not secede. So we're not talking a close vote. We're talking like overwhelming majority had wanted no part of it. And so what followed that was essentially about 2 years of secessionist-aligned guerrillas and the Confederate Army, the actual Confederate Army, collaborating, sometimes, working independent. Regardless, they would come in and they were trying to put down this unionist home guard, really is what it was, right? It was kind of standing up and defending for what they believed in, for their unionist beliefs. And so that's what the game does. It depicts that battle between the loyalist guerrillas and the anti-secessionist guerrillas and their Confederate allies. And so it was really, from a game design perspective, it was really an exploration of like trying to do this really small, zoomed in scale guerrilla conflict with some actual Confederate army mixed in there. So that was the sort of design challenge in it.
So is it almost like at a tactical level then? Like how zoomed is it?
Well, so I'll tell you what happened. I told you I have a couple of buddies that I play with locally a lot. And so as I was, I had sort of started the research, and I think I've talked to you about this before. Typically my process is I'll research a topic for about 6 months to a year before I start the design. So I research it, and then I sort of go through this concept deconstruction process, and then I start working on the design itself. And so I was at that phase where I was like, how am I going to model guerrilla warfare in this county, right? Because when we talk about conflicts, there was one battle, really. One battle of note, and it was
right.
The battle for the county seat, Huntsville. And that was a battle that took about an hour. So really we're talking about guerrilla skirmishes. And so how do you model those? And I was thinking, well, you could use blocks. It could be a block game. It could be a hidden movement game. It could be a written orders game, blah, 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 blah. But my buddy, one of my local buddies and I were playing a lot of A Few Acres of Snow at the time. And what Few Acres of Snow does really, really well is it abstracts away unit strength at any given location. So anybody that's played A Few Acres of Snow knows, okay, at this location, I have a cube. That means that I control it, right? I'm present, whatever it is, whatever abstraction you want to provide to it. But at any given point, you have no idea what the troop strength is, because you don't know what the player's hand of cards is. You can siege a location, it could be drawn out, but at any given moment, you don't know what that's supposed to represent. And so honestly, that served as the foundation of the design, was to leverage the Few Acres of Snow sort of deck building. The way you're able to initiate movement is by playing that location card. And then that's how the game leans into the concept of guerrilla warfare because you don't have troops on the board. You're present, and it's a point-to-point map. And you just say, hey, this is where I'm present. I've taken control of this. It's possible for me to be here. And then all of your troops are obfuscated by the fact that they're just cards that you've got in your deck, right?
I feel like we should, Volko should be here right now because he's, for the last year and a half, it feels like he's been obsessed with the idea of hidden information in war games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is that's how he, came on to his Coast Watchers idea. But it's like every time you hear him talk, that's all he talks about right now, which is great.
Yeah.
You've got another take on it, right? With this, I'm in all these places, but you don't know how much is where because that's in the cards.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the way guerrillas work on both sides. So the person that's playing Scott County, that's the entirety of their entire military force. The person on the Confederate side has some of that because there were Confederate guerrillas. But they also have Confederate regular units, and they were never stationed in the county. They would just come in, do some, smack around some people, and they would leave. And so the way the game models that is the card play and all of that is the same. But when they recruit their cards, you see where they're coming from. The Scott County player, the defender, sees where they're coming from, and they have to trace supply back. And that player has a lot of ability to sort of affect that line of supply. That's critical. And so the game models that sort of the buildup that you would know in real life of sort of like, hey, the Confederate Army they're preparing. Okay, now we know they're coming. Okay, now we know we can hit their supply line. So that's how it's able to integrate sort of the abstraction of an actual regular army interacting in this guerrilla sort of conflict.
So the Scott County Unionists are actually the defender. It's
effectively,
when you start talking about this, it's like them being the secessionists from the secessionists makes it sound like they're they're moving it, or that they're the attacker, but they're not.
No.
They make their stand, and then I think Mark's probably got it right here.
Yes. Yeah.
But they say this is what we're doing, and then the Confederate Army comes in as well as the Confederate guerrillas, right?
Yeah, I mean they did a very, very small home guard. There was a short period of time, like about a month, where the home guard became a Union regiment, almost in name only. They were really still operating largely as guerrillas, and they were doing a very small, like every once in a while, like one raid across the county lines or whatever. But really, all they did was defend their county, for 2 years.
So they lasted that way till 1963. Is that what you're saying?
1963. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, that's and
similar
West
story.
Virginia, that's how we got West Virginia, right? It used to just be Virginia, and then the secessionists there made West Virginia. I think I read that there was a small little chunk in Alabama that did some county in Alabama that did something similar to the Scott County thing.
Yeah, there's a few examples. So there's a place in Alabama. It wasn't uncommon, right? There were like Unionist pockets all over the place. There was one in Alabama. Many people probably have heard of Jones, the Free State of Jones, which was a movie with Matthew McConaughey. There you go. So the Free State of Jones is good. So interesting thing. I think it's a pretty good movie from an entertainment perspective. It takes a ton of liberties with the history because the history is not well documented for the Jones County, Mississippi conflict. There's a lot of conflicting history, and it wasn't nearly as clean cut as the movie would have you believe.
Yeah, so real history often is too messy to make a straightforward movie.
Yeah, and honestly, I dealt with a lot of that with this topic. I had to go, as I started researching it, I would run into a lot of brick walls. There's just not, as you can imagine, there's really no secondary sources on this. Mark's exactly right. That's totally true. And there's a lot of reasons for that, mostly economic.
I wanted to get to that. There was an economic there was a reason for the people in Scott County or in Appalachia to stay. There was no plantations there.
Correct.
There was a reason that they had no interest in supporting that cause.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah. There was. I mean, really, this is an oversimplification, but really, it was purely economic. Slavery did not help them in any way, right? They weren't going to fight for the cause of slavery for something that it wasn't doing anything for them. Economically, this just wasn't worth trading, the country for something that wasn't supporting them. And this, again, this is an oversimplification, but Tennessee at the time was divided into 3 regions: Middle Tennessee, East, and West. And it was the West and the Middle that basically went pro-Confederate, and essentially the entire eastern part of Tennessee was more unionist aligned. But yeah, I was going to say, on the topic of researching the history, when I started digging into this, there were no published secondary sources. There was one book, but I had to go down to the county in Tennessee because I kept seeing indications of these books. I would say, hey, this book, and I would find it, and it was one library would have a copy, and they wouldn't send it to me through interlibrary loan. And so I finally went down there, and I realized I had to make an appointment with their historical society because it's not open normally. They had to send somebody to be there, right? Because it's still to this day a tiny county. And I realized why is because these were books that were written by local people. The historical society would just print it off for you. It was a PDF, and they would just print it off, right? There was no actual published book. So I probably have like the biggest collection of Scott County ACW material in the United States now, other than the historical society there. But it was very difficult. And so I'm like going back to the Jones County thing in Mississippi, probably a similar situation where the history is just so convoluted and just not a lot recorded.
So when you went to Scott County, Tennessee, and you showed all this interest in their history, what was the reaction like to in the town, in the people that you ran into and talked to?
It was an interesting encounter. So I reached out to the president of the Historical Society on Facebook originally because they have a Facebook group, and so I didn't tell him why I was asking a bunch of questions. I was just asking a bunch of questions, right? Hey, can you give me a copy of this book, and et cetera. He was super helpful. And then I asked him, hey, I want to come down there and meet with you all because I need some maps, I need some books, blah, blah, blah. And so he was fine. He set it up. And I showed up that day, and it was him, and he had 2 other members of the Historic Society that were there. And they were all, older guys, and I met with them for a few hours, and during that few hours, I probably heard my dad told me X story about 100 times. That was the vast majority of my information came from their dads. But I think so. When I first got there and I first met with them, I told them, "Hey, this is for a game, right?" I thought it was important that I explained that, why I'm there. Now I'm just not some random guy showing up asking a bunch of random questions. What I didn't realize until they looked at me like I was kind of crazy. And then at the end, I said something like, hey, when I'm done with the game, I'm going to bring you guys a copy so that you can have here in case you want a copy of the Historic Society. I didn't know if they would or not, but I thought it was appropriate to offer. And they're like, well, my grandson plays video games. I was like, no. It's not a video game. It's not a video game. It's a paper game. So they seemed less... they seemed to think that was less strange than making a video game about it. So there you go. So yeah.
Well, so they feel. Well, I'll let you address Mark's comment here before I have another question for you. But I think everybody would like to see that.
That would be a dream come true. Yeah, that would be. I saw Mark. I haven't ever told Mark this, but I saw Mark at I think the first time I saw him in person was at Circle DC or something. And I think when I first saw him, I just stood there and was in shock, right? So I don't know. I couldn't speak to him. I was just a fanboying. So
yeah, same here. It wasn't until I saw him the second time that I got I got the nuts up to go and say, hey,
right.
Interview you, can I talk to you? Yeah. I was a bit starstruck. I'll say that, sure.
Yeah.
So going back to your meeting in Scott County, I guess what I was wondering was like, uh, they had all these memories from their fathers or their grandfathers or whatever. Was there a feeling of pride in their history? Were they like, we were these bastards who wouldn't go with the grain. We were like fiercely independent. Was there any of that sort of feeling, or what was the vibe?
This is an interesting. Okay, so I'll just be real with you when we have this conversation, because this is a little bit strange. Not strange. Okay, so this county rebelled against Tennessee during secessionism. It is a very it's a very red county now. Very red. I like overwhelming. I think it had the highest percentage of Trump voters in Tennessee. So, that's why I met with, there was 3 guys there. I could tell that they themselves were conflicted about the history of the county as I was talking to them. Meaning, I think they would feel differently now, maybe, than the people that the county did at the time, if you will, right? So it was an interesting conversation with them about, and I was not there to say one side is right and wrong and blah 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 blah, even though I overwhelmingly feel that way. I was just there asking for materials, but quite a few times, it was clear that they were maybe even more. A couple of them were maybe even more pro-Confederate than they were, proud of the history of the county. So it was a very strange sort of thing to unpack, because I would be, if I was them, I'd be like very proud and, this is an amazing thing. And you could almost sense like, well, let me tell you, literally one of them was like, let me tell you about my ancestors who were on the Confederate side of this instead of the people who were loyalists.
The people who were here fighting.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've only brought it up because I think of Tennessee as a very red place these days, and to have this remarkable little chunk of pro-union history there is, it must be the same thing in the spots in Alabama or wherever else where they stick out like a sore thumb. I guess I was just wondering if there was anybody who was still holding on to that and feeling like, yes,
they're very proud. I would say in general, they're very proud of it, right? Like there's a monument there that talks about the free state of Scott. So there's plenty of like history still in the county that the county is very proud of, in like that in totality. There absolutely is.
Right. That makes sense. So it's
more of the individual level where you see that conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
We're proud of it as a community, but when you really drill down into it, it's like, well, my uncle who wore the butternut was that's who I'm sort of I love work.
Right.
Or, whatever. Yeah. That must have been pretty cool to be able to go like right to that spot and get like, there's a reason that all that stuff is just in that one place, because there's maybe one copy of each of these bits of things, right? And why would they send it to anybody else? Because lose it.
Yeah, the most impactful thing for sure was, and this is almost like a scene out of a movie, right? Like Indiana Jones or something. So, I've been meeting with them for hours, and at the very end, one of them was like, hey, you should probably see this. And he takes me over to a drawer, and he opens the drawer, and he takes out this map, and he lays it out. And the map is from like it's the original map from like 1850 or something of the county. And so I immediately took a picture of it, because it was the holy grail, because I had been looking for maps of the period, right? And the best I could do was some like sort of post-Civil War sort of zoomed out maps. Like I didn't have the level of detail I wanted. And this map had like individual family land plots.
Right.
It was amazing. It was
like homestead. Right. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm with Mark. I think that's going to be when the rubber meets the road. Absolutely. We live in interesting times, right? Oh, look, there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go for anybody who's doing an ACW game. Perfect. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because if you listen to Mark talk about his ACW stuff, he talks about he's read a ton of history, but he sort of ignores the history books, and there's documents, the actual unit reports, this giant like 20-volume thing from back then, and he's always talking about, well, I just go back to the source and I read what the commanders said, and I take their word for it over, what's written later. It's like, oh, there you go. This guy this guy digs deep for sure. Well, so this game is still very much in the planning then, or not. I mean, you're deep in the middle of it. We're not.
Yeah. The design for it's complete. It's now about to start art and graphic design.
Right. Who's your designer?
So one thing, the OR. So I did, and Mark's absolutely right. So I used the OR quite a bit. Now the game is a little bit unusual, like I mentioned before, because it is very, very much at the zoomed in level. So a lot of the people referenced in the game are the actual inhabitants of the town, not so much the generals and stuff. But the OR absolutely was critical for a few key pieces in the game.
Well, that makes sense. If you're focusing on the actual people. I mean, that's sort of like resist is, but you're getting that you're focusing on the real. You're using real people in the spot of the game that's the heart of the game.
Yeah. So I mean, I won't delve into the details too much, but essentially, most of the locations in the county will have references to the people who were at those locations doing the things that were, the sort of memorable elements of those. And these were like, I mean, for example, the most extreme example is a 16-year-old girl who was the daughter of a pilot, a soldier who was, he was a member of the Home Guard who actually joined the regiment that was there, but he was also a pilot. So he was sneaking, guys up to Kentucky so they could join the Union Army. So he was very much targeted
a river pilot?
A pilot, like as in the term of sneaking, a guide, yeah. And so he was very much targeted by the Confederates, right? And so they came to his house to get him, and he was, of course, in hiding. His family was there, and they were roughing up the family. And one of his daughters, 16-year-old, she'd had enough of it, and so she just attacked one of them with an axe. He wound up like bayoneting her in the eye, so she lost her eye, and he shot at her. She lost a couple of fingers. She went on to kill him. And they fled. The Confederate soldiers fled, and she was one of the only women that got a war pension after the Civil War.
Wow.
Right? So like she has, so like she's in the game. So those are the kinds of individual people stories that are in the game. And I've got, of course, I do what I always do, and I've got the 40-page historical books that I've written together.
That's what I was going to ask. It's like,
of course.
You can't put all those details right into the game, but but you can put them into the surrounding. Historical research and stuff that you put in there. Oh, that's fantastic. When I think about a game like this, I think it's like, I mean, the key thing that'll make it or break it is if the game is good, right? That's what everybody would be interested in. But it's a way of getting history, like little known history or underknown history out there. And the better the game is, the more people discover the history. It's sort of, I don't know, the only word that comes to mind is insidious, but there's nothing bad about it. It's not insidious. It's just, I don't know, clever. It's good.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, that's exactly what I'm hoping is that obviously it's a beyond niche topic. So it's not like it's some big game, but hopefully enough people discover this story through the game that like it brings some light to that. I think it's an important part of the history, and it doesn't, like I said at the beginning, it doesn't really get told. So, that would be a really awesome thing if just, a handful of people discover this really interesting and I think important story.
It's the same deal with Night Witches, really. Like, there's a lot of people who won't know that story, and I think and also the stories of the female snipers for the Russians, huge part of the snipers there. And I think those stories are important because just the other day I was watching a YouTube channel, a gamer, and he was like complaining about women in the military. And they could be in the military, but they couldn't have combat roles, right? And it's like, for fuck's sake, what do we, Like, have you not heard of
I know.
of these women?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I know. Absolutely. One thing I did want to say, because I think you were asking about it, and I should have said this at the very beginning. So Rebels Against Rebellion is co-designed with Trevor Benjamin. So early on in the design process, I wasn't sure who I was going to ask to be my co-designer on it, but I always have one. So I knew I'd want somebody. And so after I'd finished the history part, I sent Trevor, I was just bouncing and I had some ideas for the combat system to him. And I love him because we were like brothers, right? He's like my best friend in the world. But I sent him this idea. I was like, hey, here's my idea for this combat system. And he's like, you're an idiot. This is an overwrought combat system. That's not the point of this game. This isn't what you're trying to do. Why don't you just strip this all out? And I was like, yeah, you're right. So then I was like, oh, well, you should just design it with me then. So he's thank goodness he's come on, and he's, I mean, like we often do, basically I kind of come up with what the game's going to be about, and this is the core system, and then he does the hard stuff with me, which is play it 100 million times and develops it and stuff like that. So, and then I should mention that the artist for it's going to be Kwanchai Moria, who did the art for War Story Occupied France, and he's more known in the broad game hobby, not the war game side.
Well, I want to ask you two things. One is just mention. I've liked the work of you and Trevor so much that I was out looking for a game that my wife and I could play, and I found his game. I think it's called Mandela. And, and went, my wife might like this. So it was like, and it doesn't even have that stinker David Thompson on it.
That's right.
I wanted to ask you, I forgot to ask you this when we were talking about Night Witches before. Is the artist for Night Witches the same as the artist for the original Undaunted stuff?
No. So the artist for Night Witches is Ian O'Toole. Do you know him?
I don't know.
Okay, so in the mainstream of board games, he's got to be top 3 artists there is.
Right.
I mean, like in the Eurogame world, he is the man.
Like Roger McGowan was when I was 20.
Yeah. No exaggeration. He if he's not like number 1, he's right there. Right. So he's unbelievable. Just wait until you see the maps, the graphic, because I would say he's a graphic designer first, an illustrator second, and that's not to say he's not a good illustrator, but what you'll see, but he does both for his projects. And so what you'll see is this seamless integration, and he's not just doing the illustration and graphic design, like he's playing the game. And so we've actually made some slight gameplay improvements based on his feedback for integration with the illustration and graphic design.
I think that's so important because the thing that gets overlooked sometimes is how important user interface or user experience is, and how that can actually impact gameplay.
Yeah.
And I think of designers like Kim Kanger or Mark Simonich, who do the whole shoot and match themselves and are fantastic at illustration and UI. And it's like it's just a straight line from their idea for the game to what's on the table. They don't have to take their baby and hand it off to some designer that they don't know.
Yeah.
So if you have someone that actually is interested in actually playing the game and talking to you about UI ideas, and I was gonna mention Redmond Simonson as well, because he was sort of like he was really the guy that said UI is important in wargaming. Let's put a bunch of charts right on the board so that we can keep our focus on the board, and instead of constantly looking up. He was, and also he was the guy that made things the most streamlined. His style was so spare, and it's like Scandinavian furniture of war game design.
Yeah,
you sort of love it, right? Anyway, yeah. So, great to hear. I now I know who Ian O'Toole is. I'll have to look for his name.
Yeah.
How did you manage to snag like such a top shelf designer?
He was interested in it. He came to us.
Oh, great.
Yeah. He does like he is very much the Euro guy, but in like heavy Euros. But I think for one thing, I think he was just interested in the topic, right? And so when he found out we were doing a game on it, he reached out to us. But I think he also kind of enjoys those kinds of games. I just think he doesn't get a chance to work on them. So we'll see.
He plays that stuff, but he doesn't.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's totally cool. Good for you guys. Like that's a chance to have some. Also, that game's Fort Circle, right?
It is. That's right.
So I would imagine that he would also be looking at like Fort Circle. They're not afraid of jacking up the price of a game by $10 or $15 to get the components they want.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that looking at if I was a graphic designer and I went, this is going to be published by Fort Circle, they're going to like let me make really nice stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and honestly, it even goes beyond the graphic design and illustration, because he's the one driving the types of components we're using and what they're looking like and all of that. So he's really, I mean, you could basically say he's doing the product creation, right?
Right. Yeah. He's going to decide if certain bits are wood or plastic or chits or whatever. Like all that's going to be on him. I get it.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty exciting. But we're not going to see that until like mid 2026.
I would imagine. Yeah. Mid.
Well,
late.
and also with the tariff weirdness, we actually could be farther out than that.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll open it up. If anybody has anything they want to ask David about any of his games, go ahead and shoot us a question. I think I've played most of your 2-player games, and I like them so much. I've started, like I told you, with Resist. I've started breaking the seal on some solo games. So I'm pretty soon I'm going to be a David Thompson completist if you can afford to be such a thing. I look forward to playing Resist. I'm just glad that I get to finally play it in English instead of French, because I probably, when I came out of high school, I probably still could have done it. I was, my high school French was fine, but that was 40 years ago. So I've let it go. So it was not going to happen.
Well, when you take a look at Resist, speaking of illustration, my goodness, I love the illustration from Albert Montes, the artist for it. I think it's phenomenal, the style he uses.
Yeah. I've seen I haven't. I don't know about the. I've seen lots of. I've seen the box cover, of course, but I've also seen tons of pictures from inside as well. It's just before we get to these questions. That some of what that style reminds me of somebody else's game. Maybe Morris Suckling's.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like that. The game on spying.
Yeah, so they're both from Salt and Pepper. The publisher is the same.
Right.
So it's interesting. The illustrators for Maurice's game, The Hunt, are the graphic designers for Resist. So they didn't do the illustration, but they clearly, I suspect, and they're great people. I love them. Their Meeple Foundry is what they call it. So I think they're husband and wife. Certainly they're partners. But I don't know if they intentionally sort of referenced that style, emulated the style, or if that's their own style. But I think that some of that was either inspired by, or there was direction from Salt and Pepper to sort of emulate the style.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's great style, and it sings to you of spy, intelligence, danger. All that stuff is in a not a comic book style, but I guess a comic book style, but in the best sense of the word.
Yeah. It feels very appropriate to the period for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Agreed.
Like posters. Well, I'll let you have this poster. Soldiers in postman's uniform. What made you come up with that topic?
Yeah. So I had been working. So Soldiers and Postmen's Uniforms is the third game in the Valiant Defense series, following Castle Litter and Pavlov's House. And so I had designed those, and I had probably completed the design for Pavlov's House. I don't remember exactly where it was in the timeline, but I had posted on Board Game Geek, and I said, "Hey, I'm done with this. I'm looking for new topics for this series, this sort of Valiant Defense series." Mm-hmm. And a person replied on Board Game Geek with this story. I didn't know about it beforehand, and he wound up serving as he's credited as a co-designer on the game, but really what it was is he was the historical expert. He was a gamer. He's from Danzig, Gdansk now, so he had very close ties to it, and he helped me with from every part of the game. And so he was the one who said, "Hey, if you don't know about this story, there's this post office in Danzig on the first day of World War II. They defended the post office." And so my wife and I actually traveled to Gdansk and met with them and toured. Right. Yeah, we toured. The post office is still there. It's a museum now, but I was able to see, because it's all based on that one building, right? So it's super zoomed in, and we were able to go in the museum, and I was able to kind of get the lines of sight that the Germans had as they were attacking and stuff. And so it was another example of being able to visit the location and get a true sense for it. It might be because, and are you familiar with the story at all for this?
I've only read what's on the BGG page, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So I won't tell it's a whole story in and of itself, but the bottom line is that the defenders, the people inside the post office, were a mixture of, some people were, like one actual military person, a bunch of paramilitary trained people, but for the most part, they were postmen, right? To include a janitor and his wife and his daughter. And the Germans ultimately, the SS and the SA and the Danzig City Police, they ultimately won the siege by setting the basement on fire and burning them out. And it killed a lot of them, and to include the little girl died of her wounds. And so it's probably the one that's like the most personal to me in terms of the closeness of the story. So of all the games I've worked on, that was probably the one that was like the most emotionally charged, I think. And so it was another example of like, okay, this needs to be a game. Like, people should know about this heroic stand of these people.
And when you say it's so zoomed in on that house, it's even more zoomed in than Pavlov's house that has sort of a telescoping sort of scale, right? Yeah,
because we're unlike Pavlov's house, which is telling really like it's the story of a building, but within a larger battle, right?
Right.
Like a sort of an operational story that's happening at the same time, or even Landsworth Ridge, which is sort of like zoomed in at almost like it's like the northern end of a town. This is like, no kidding, all the action happens in one building.
In one building, yeah.
In one building, yeah.
Just talk about Landsworth Ridge a little bit, just because like that's one of those ones where it's like a stand, right? It's like it's like the how many against how many? What was the?
It depends on if you believe the American version of the story is like 20 against 5,000, and they stopped it for a day and blah blah blah. I mean, it was so probably there's a lot of things about it, right? So you have realistically, you're probably talking about 20 guys versus a few hundred. That's the truth. The Germans were paratroops, but paratroops in name only. I mean, we're really talking about replacement troops.
Right. So they weren't special service troops.
No, the officers were very poorly trained. They had a handful of NCOs that knew what were going on, but the officers were running the show. So this is another entire podcast where you talk about why design solo games. This is a good reason to design a solo game where you don't want to simulate, you don't want to put the players in the actual positions of these two sides, because there's no game. If you have an intelligent person running the Germans, they win in about 3 seconds. How do you simulate being idiot officers in this case for the Germans? But yeah, they were essentially the lead element for Piper's route during the Battle of the Bulge first day, and they got essentially slowed down by this intelligence and reconnaissance platoon for a day, and that's really what's one of the most interesting things. It's not that it was just a single platoon. It's not even really a platoon that's supposed to be holding the line. These guys were put in a gap area. They're an INR platoon. They're not supposed to be defending a position. Right. So they were doing by themselves as a platoon, cut off, doing a thing they're not really supposed to be doing, and holding out for a day.
They're not much better than the postmen. in terms of
not really
suitability for what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, they did have, thankfully they had a couple of heavy machine guns, which was really why they were able to be successful. Their position, the fact they were dug in, they were prepared. They had a couple of heavy machine guns, but yeah, they were not, honestly, no, not a whole lot better position for it.
Talking about you've designed so many solo games, and I remember when I first talked to you about that a couple of years ago, and I said, how often should somebody expect to win? And I think he said I think it was 30%. I think was you said that's what you were shooting for. And a year later, I interviewed John Butterfield, and of course he's like a wonderful solo game designer as well. And I said, how often do you think the player should win? And he said maybe about 40%. And I said, oh, David Thompson says 30%. Like, oh, that's good. Like, really close. That's great. And then I can't remember what I was talking to another designer just recently and they were trying to design a solo game. And I said, well, how often do you expect the person to win this? They wanted me to look at it. And so how often? And they said 50%. And I was like, dude, that's way too high. Your game's going to get played and tossed aside. That's a recipe for somebody winning it on the first go and losing interest right away.
Yep, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen in a solo game if somebody wins at their first play. I mean, that's the death knell.
Yeah, it makes it look like the game is not challenging in the least, right?
Yep.
It's but I thought it was funny that you and John sort of. You're the new solo guy, and he's like the old solo guy. Well, look.
There you go. That's right. There you go. Make it impossible. Well,
almost never is better than 50%. I think, though.
Yeah. Well, I do a little bit of a tricky thing in Resist. Resist is a game where it's got compare your score, and whatever your score is how well you've done, right? So depending on your perspective, it's almost impossible to lose because you can choose to stop at any point. And if you do, you've completed the game, you just haven't done well. But the top level, what Resist is, for people that aren't familiar, it's about the Spanish Maquis, right? So going into Spain, trying to liberate Spain after World War II. And so it's the Spanish Maquis against Franco. So the chances of them being successful of liberating Spain against Franco is precisely zero. There's precisely zero chance of success. Well, there is a victory condition in the game where you are successful, but you can't reach it.
Right.
It's impossible. It's there because that's the point, right? You can't. Right. And man, let me tell you what, that pisses people off. That makes so many people angry because they want to do that, right? And I'm like, nope. That's the point. That's the point. There was no chance.
I think it's actually kind of great that probably the majority of players of that game don't know that.
Right.
That
right.
It's not possible. It's probably good for them to keep trying to liberate Spain.
Keep on trying. Keep on trying.
I was out for dinner with friends a little bit ago, and they're Francophiles. They spend part of the year in France, and so I was trying to tell them about Resist, and that it was about Spanish resistance, but I said that they were the Maquis, but the Maquis is like the French.
The French was,
yeah. And it was like we just went down this rabbit hole of like, what the hell's the real name? Is that what the Spanish actually called themselves, or did they have a?
Yeah. So when people think of the Maquis, they think of one of two things usually. They either think of the French Maquis, which are what people know about, or they think about the Maquis from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which was what they were called. But they don't think about the Spanish Maquis. They're not well known, right? And so what you had were these Spanish, coming out of Spain, right? Basically because they had to stay alive. And as they would join up with the Allies, they would be trained by the French Maquis. And so they became the Spanish Maquis.
The Spanish. Oh, well, I can't wait to have dinner with them again so that I can clear up this whole thing about why the Spanish use the French word for their freedom fighters, basically. Yeah. Well, see, Mark's obviously a hard ass when it comes to solo as well.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's
same
awesome.
here. That's the way to keep people playing, right? That's
right.
That's it. If I think this has been a lovely yak, and we've really got to know about your new game, which is the main reason. Well, I wanted to talk to you, and then I also, I wanted a chance to tell everybody about that dog who really likes me. So those are my two big things tonight. So I got to do them both. Anyway, so unless anybody else has any last questions, we should probably wrap it up. I think you've talked about all your different. I have one other question for you. When it came to you said you had a bad combat system, and then you told it to Trevor.
Yeah.
And then he became your partner in that game.
Yeah.
Were you actually going to try and design that solo you just about never design things just by yourself?
No, I wouldn't have probably. I would have probably asked, if not Trevor, somebody to work on it with me, because I don't really, the idea of design where because some designers do this, they'll design a game, which is to say that they do maybe like 80% of the game, and then they'll give it to a publisher, right? And the expectation is that the publisher will do a bunch of playtesting and development, etc. I'm not a big fan of that personally. I prefer to just absolutely beat a game to absolute death. So what you'll see with a lot of my games is they're either solo games or two-player games, and that's for practical purposes where I basically just like to play it a million times with my design partner. And so Rebels Against Rebellion is a two-player game. And so if no other reason, from a practical perspective, if I have a co-design partner, we're just going to play it together a million times, right? So I don't have to look for play testers or whatever. I mean, of course, you want blind play testing after the fact and blah, blah, blah. But from the literally hundreds of plays of the game, it's just easier to have a co-design partner. The other thing, though, is I just don't want to ever run the risk of getting into some sort of rut where I'm just, I'll make a new game and I'll just kind of grind through the process myself. And I mean, I would be a little bit concerned that my stuff would start to look samey or not be challenged or carrying a lot of personal baggage. And so for me, it's just easier and better. And I enjoy, here's the other thing, right? There's two other really practical benefits. One, it's not my job. So I'm not here to make money. It needs to be enjoyable. And I would rather be working with somebody than sitting by myself working on it. And then two, co-designing it holds me accountable. If I have a design partner, and Trevor and I meet twice a week, every week.
Right. Having a partner, then you have deadlines. You have things you have to make. Whereas when you're just by yourself, there's nobody holding your feet to the fire.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting, though, that your idea of a co-designer as being a replacement for a developer, basically, right, is we're going to work it's like having a developer along for the whole ride, where you're just we're going to play this thing to death.
Yeah.
Do you get super sick of your games by the time you're done?
Yeah, sometimes I do. I mean, it's funny because I don't get sick. Certainly I just need a break every once in a while, right? So Trevor and I are working on the game right now. I do a pretty good job of version controlling and version tracking. It's on version 30. That means that underwent a significant gameplay change, right? So 30 times. Yeah. And each of those, you can imagine we probably played on average between 5 and 10 times, right? So, that's a lot. That's a lot of playing a single game. And so even if you love something, it's okay, that's a lot of times to play something. You need a break from it.
For sure.
Something fresh.
I don't think it's unusual for designers to be sort of done with their games by the time they're sent to publication, right? It's I think probably novelists are a bit the same way with I just don't want to think about this novel anymore.
Yeah.
Jonathan wants to know if you'll tell us what's next for Undaunted.
I can't say. I can say that we're done with it. It's already completed. Everything's because Osprey runs an extremely tight ship with their schedule. So they tell us, we will meet with them. They will tell us. Well, it's for one thing. I will say this: it's become an amazing partnership between me, Trevor, Roland McDonald, the artist, and the Osprey team, meaning the graphic design team, etc. When we started on the most recent Undaunted, which hasn't been announced yet, before we did a single bit of work, the entire creative team came together and talked about it as a project. This is what it's going to be. Robbie McNiven, who is the guy who wrote the narrative pieces to Stalingrad, was brought in. So everybody was there at the start to say, hey, here's the idea. This is what we're going to do. So from an experience and a product perspective, that is like a fine oiled machine. They run a very tight ship. So we typically know for about 3 years out that, hey, this is what the Undaunted we're going to work on. It usually takes me and Trevor about a year to design it. Then they have about 2 years after that to get it out. So we're in that period of like the game design has been completed. I just can't talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, also, Osprey wants to and do their whole publicity campaign.
Yeah.
They don't want to, like, they want to be able to do a bang. They don't want it to be leaked out ahead of the time and not make any kind of a splash when it's officially announced.
Yeah.
That really makes sense. But it's like a real drag for Jonathan Dyer, who wants to know what's next for us.
Sorry, Jonathan.
Because now that you put Callisto into the mix, nobody knows what.
Nobody knows. It could be anything.
Everybody wanted Pacific, but you didn't do it, and now well, will he do Pacific, or are we going to have Undaunted at the OK Corral? Like, it could be anything. You know?
Anything at all goes. Yeah, that's right.
Well, whatever it is, I'll buy it. The Osprey's also been an interesting publisher because their component quality is beautiful as well. So
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, they're great.
You totally got the right guys there.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think that's everything. It's been wonderful talking to you again. I'm sure we'll talk for a second after we go off the air here, but thanks so much for being my guest and making making all these people happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been fun. As always, love chatting with you.
It's always great to catch up with David. I talked to a fair number of designers, and I don't think there's anyone more open to everything than David. He's truly one of the good guys in our hobby, and it's a pleasure to have him on Pushing Cardboard whenever I can. Well, that's it for another episode. I guess finally for parting shots, I was listening to a video from a fairly popular wargame channel the other day, and the host was worried about the wargame hobby going woke. He was worried that some publisher had embraced diversity and inclusion in their hiring practices. He was worried that wargames now were going to lie about history, that wargames were changing to more Euro-style mechanics, and games were going to become too simple in order to appeal to a more woke Eurogaming crowd. Complete bullshit, really. I mean, the simple fact is there are more games being produced today than ever before, of all types. If there's a type of game you don't like, don't buy it. Don't play it. And if someone else likes that kind of game, well, just leave them in peace to enjoy their game. It's not a zero-sum experience here. Just because more entry-level games are being produced doesn't mean less meaty monsters are being made. Just because some designers are using Euro-style mechanics doesn't mean there's any less good old Hex Encounters games. Look, you're going to be fine. There's plenty of games for everyone. Just enjoy them. Anyway, that's it. Thanks as always to all the Pushing Cardboard supporters. Whether it's by becoming a Ko-Fi patron or buying swag, it all helps paying those hosting and streaming bills. And thanks as well to everyone who takes the time to stop by the website or Discord channel. It's all appreciated. If you'd like to receive the newsletter and you aren't, you can sign up at the website. There's one just for the podcast, which contains links to some of the things discussed in each episode, and another if you want to be notified of any special events. And there's a third one now that's just for the live stream. It just comes out every 2 weeks to say what the live stream is going to be out. So check them all out. Anyway, that's it. Until next time, I'll have news from Iceland. Talk to you then.